Saturday, 26th of January 2019, I hit send on a tweet to FIFA. It said I'll be there on Monday at 2 p.m. for a meeting, or I'll hold a press conference on your doorstep for the world's media. 48 hours later, I met with Fatma Samura, FIFA Secretary General. So why was I racing to Zurich to gate crash the world's football governing body? Well, it was a mercy mission on behalf of millions of people around the world to demand that they step up to help free a young Bahraini footballer and refugee, Hakim Al-Arabi, from a Thai prison whose life was in terrible, terrible danger. I just met this kid for the first time only a couple of days earlier in the Bangkok remand prison, and it was even worse than what I'd been warned. I'd never seen that level of desperation or fear on the face of a human being ever before. He hadn't seen his wife for 2 months, and when we held up a letter from her to the glass, he read it hungrily, desperately, as though it was the last piece of paper on earth. Nothing else existed in the world for him in that moment except news of his loved one. Was she safe? Was she okay? He was a young Bahraini footballer who was incarcerated and tortured back in 2012 as part of the Arab Spring, as one of around 150 athletes who were rounded up and of whom an example was made. He said that when he was tortured, they sat him down and beat his legs with a pipe, saying that you'll never play football again. Then, when he could take no more, they'd stand him up, walk him around so the blood would get back in the limbs, sit him down and go again. That's what he was facing. In a way, he was one of the lucky ones, lucky enough to be able to flee Bahrain and escape to Australia seeking asylum, which he received. A couple of years later, he bravely spoke out against a member of the ruling family who was a candidate in the FIFA presidential election against Gianni Infantino, the most powerful seat in world sport. He said that when he was being tortured, this guy never helped him, didn't protect him, and never spoke up on his behalf. And he said, how could this person be in control of running all of world football? Later, when he felt safe, he went with his young bride to Thailand on their honeymoon, and their great excitement soon turned into utter despair when the Thai police boarded the plane on the tarmac and arrested him on an Interpol Red Notice. So began a titanic struggle for his life that drew us deep into a world of international politics, of incalculable wealth, of power, influence, and raw, sickening injustice. So what's a red notice? Well, it's an international alert by Interpol to locate and provisionally arrest someone pending extradition, surrender or similar legal action. Now, under Interpol's constitution, they are prohibited from undertaking any intervention of a political nature, which this demonstrably was. They're also bound to act in the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of which was the right against refoulement, or the return of a refugee to the country from which they've fled. So Interpol should have rejected the request from Bahrain immediately because it violated international human rights law. Although when challenged, the notice was withdrawn. He'd already been arrested. And he was facing all of the torture that had occurred just a couple of years before. Come with me back inside the FIFA meeting now, to which I took a close friend, head of the Global Athletes Union, Australian lawyer Brendan Schwab. I said to Fatma, I'm not the Prime Minister of Australia, so I can't speak on behalf of the country, but I am an ex-player and therefore I do represent our current and former players, our football community and millions of people around the world who feel strongly about Hakim's fate, and I'm accountable to them. I'm going to tell you exactly what I've learnt in Bangkok in the last week, which is terrifying, And by the end of this meeting, you're going to be accountable to them as well. So how is it then that I could demand a meeting with the world's largest sporting organisation that operates according to its own rules, that's accountable to no one but itself, that speaks in billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of participants, and that oversees the FIFA World Cups, the largest sporting tournaments known to humankind? People power. That's how. When I told Fatma there were over 150,000 signed petitions, it had real power. Increasingly, sport is having to face its responsibility to protect all who come within its purview, whether fans, players, or the myriad other stakeholders. The growing field of sport and human rights is a vitally important one in a world where the rights of people everywhere are increasingly under threat. Sport, as the universal language, has the power to unite people of all backgrounds, to let us come together across all boundaries of religion, nationalities, cultures and races, and to let us finally understand that we're global citizens, that we're all in this together. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's okay for you, Craig. You are an ex-player, you have a public platform, and I'm just one person. I hear you, and I know that we've all questioned whether we can make a difference at some point in our lives. Don't tell anyone, but I felt exactly the same way when I was approached to help Hakeem. I thought I can share a few tweets, and I can certainly lend my reputation to this campaign, but how much can I really do? I'd certainly never done anything like this before, and that carries a level of doubt and worry that's perfectly natural. The only question is whether we give in to it. But nothing could have been achieved without a powerful, brilliant global coalition of like-minded people, all of whom made a huge contribution to this campaign. We had brilliant activists, advocates, lawyers. We had footballers, current and former. We had NGOs, human rights organisations. We had Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and we had high-profile supporters all around the world. Every one of those people made a decisive contribution. And Hakeem stands as proof today of the power of all of us when we come together in pursuit of what is right and what is just. In the middle of the campaign, I knew that I had to go to Bangkok, and that carried a level of risk. There was security risk here at home, and the unknown lay ahead. I had to take a leap of faith, as did all involved. And none of us could ever anticipate where we'd end up several months later. But that's the point, isn't it? There's no such thing as certainty of outcome. There's always trepidation and even fear at taking that first step. But our voices matter, our actions make a difference. And one young soul and his future is testament to what can happen when we all take that leap together. We shouldn't forget that Hakeem was a refugee on a protection visa under Australia's care, and he was one of around 70 million in the world today. They need the support of the community of nations. We saw sport step forward and help a young footballer like Hakeem, but what about all of those who don't have the support of the vast community of football? Sport was able to shine a light on Hakeem's plight, but what about all those who suffer in the dark? Too often they're faceless, seen as inhuman, but they're not, are they? They're human beings. They're mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, and kids. Just innocent children. A refugee is you and I with a different passport. Would you travel to the ends of the earth for safety, for freedom, to save your family? Of course you would. We all would. So how can we think less of others that do so? Australia and countless other nations must be better at placing humanitarian values at the forefront of everything that we do. It should be the default position. The person, then the policy. Our treatment of each other in this room, of people around the world, across any boundary, religion, nationalities, colour and race, is critical to producing the world in which we want to live. I came here today to acknowledge the power of everyday people in Australia and around the world who stepped forward to help save a young man from torture, possibly worse, and to enable him to be able to dream about a life free of tyranny and brutality. If any of you helped at all, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You gave us strength to be able to save others and hope that every refugee can be seen as human, worthy of our care. There are countless issues about which you might wish to see change, and if so, I urge you to try. Take the plunge. Take your leap of faith. Add your voice, your heart, your passion and your soul. And you never know quite where you'll end up. I walked out of that FIFA meeting almost 8 months ago and strode across to front the world's media to report that FIFA had agreed to work together to save a young man's life. And just 16 days later, Hakeem Al Arabi emerged at Melbourne Airport after 77 days in a Bangkok prison into the arms of his young wife and a future of boundless opportunity. That's what you and I, what we can do together. That's people power.